The drill screamed against ancient metal, sending sparks into the darkness of space. Vreel watched through his helmet, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence, as he always did when nervous. The structure before them was massive, larger than any ship in the Concordat fleet, and it had been floating here in dead space for longer than anyone could remember. "Be careful," Thasis warned, her scales reflecting the work lights. "We don't know what's inside." Vreel nodded but kept drilling. The archaeological expedition had been searching for 3 months, following old star charts that made no sense. The charts showed systems that no longer existed and warnings written in languages that predated the Concordat itself. When they found this structure, covered in symbols nobody could read, Vreel knew they had discovered something important. The drill broke through. Air hissed out from the breach, old and stale but breathable according to the sensors. Vreel pulled back, confused. This wasn't a dead wreck. Something inside was still working, still maintaining atmosphere after who knew how many thousands of years. "Thasis, you need to see this," Vreel called. Before his commander could respond, lights began activating inside the structure. Not the slow flicker of failing systems, but deliberate, sequential illuminations spreading through corridors that stretched beyond their sensors' range. Then came a sound that made Vreel's antenna flatten against his head in fear. A voice, speaking in a language he had never heard. But somehow, the meaning pushed into his mind through the translator, built into his suit. Revival sequence initiated. Critical hull breach detected. Emergency protocols active. Deep within the structure, Kang Dae-hyun felt cold. He had been cold for so long that he had forgotten what warmth felt like. Then, suddenly, burning heat flooded through his veins. His eyes snapped open. Above him, a transparent cover slid away, and he gasped, pulling air into lungs that felt like they had never been used. His training kicked in before his mind fully processed where he was. Dae-hyun rolled out of the pod, his body moving on instinct, even as his thoughts remained foggy. Around him, other pods were opening. Men and women stumbled out, coughing, confused, some crying out in panic. "Everyone stay calm," Dae-hyun ordered, his voice rough. "Security personnel, report status." Years of discipline brought order to chaos. 5 other security officers responded, though their voices shook. Dae-hyun looked around the massive chamber. Thousands of cryopods filled the space, stretching up into darkness. Most remained closed, their status lights dead. His stomach twisted. How many were gone? "Commander Kang," a woman's voice called. Dae-hyun turned to see Yun Mireille climbing from her pod, steadier than the others. As chief scientist, she had trained for this moment. "What's our status?" "Unknown," Dae-hyun admitted. "We need to reach the bridge." They moved through corridors that hummed with renewed life. Emergency lights guided their path. Dae-hyun's mind raced, trying to remember. The mission, the sleep, the reason they had agreed to close their eyes for 10,000 years. It came back in pieces, each memory heavier than the last. The bridge doors opened at Mireille's touch. She moved to the main console, while Dae-hyun checked tactical stations. Everything looked functional, but ancient. Dust-covered surfaces that should have been maintained by automated systems. "We have a hull breach," Mireille reported, her fingers dancing across the controls. Something penetrated the outer shell. The ship interpreted it as an attack and initiated revival protocols. "How long were we asleep?" Dae-hyun asked. Mireille went silent, the kind of silence that meant the answer would hurt. 10,247 years. Dae-hyun closed his eyes. They had expected 10,000. The extra 2 centuries shouldn't matter. But somehow they did. How many survived? Ja. 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 Another terrible silence. 512. Out of 100,000. Numb. Sumri. Numb. The number hit him like a physical blow. Dae-hyun had led these people into the sleep. He had promised they would wake together. That they would see the future humanity had sacrificed everything to ensure could exist. Now, 99% of them were gone, their pods having failed over the millennia while the ship drifted in dead space. "Commander," one of the security officers called from a monitoring station. "We have visitors. Non-human. They're the ones who breached the hull." End quote. On the screen, Daehyun saw creatures he didn't recognize. Insectoid beings and reptilian ones, wearing suits marked with symbols that meant nothing to him. They were backing away from the breach, clearly frightened. "They don't know what we are," Mirai observed. "Look at their movements. They're confused. Not hostile." Daehyun made a decision. He activated the external communications array, hoping their translators could bridge 10,000 years of linguistic drift. "Unknown vessels. This is Commander Kang Daehyun of the human colony ship Eternal Vigil. You have accidentally triggered our revival systems. We mean you no harm." "Oh." The response took several minutes. When it came, the voice was trembling. "Human? We have no records of any species called human. What are you? Where did you come from?" Daehyun and Mirai exchanged looks. The galaxy had forgotten them. 10,000 years had erased humanity from living memory. "We need to access the warning beacons," Mirai said quietly. She worked the console, her expression growing more concerned with each passing second. Finally, she looked up at Daehyun, fear clear in her eyes. "The beacons are dead. All of them. They've been offline for at least 5,000 years. Daehyun understood the implications immediately. Humanity had surrounded their sleep with warnings, monuments to their shame and danger, beacons that told the galaxy to leave them alone, to let them serve their sentence in peace. Now, those warnings were gone, and the galaxy had no idea what they had just awakened. "Pull up the final logs," Daehyun ordered. "Before we went to sleep. I need to remember why we did this." Mirai hesitated, then accessed the archives. On the screen, images appeared. Worlds burning. Cities reduced to ash. Species fleeing before human war fleets. The Burning, they had called it. The war that nearly destroyed the galaxy. Started by humanity's expansion, and ended only when humans themselves chose to stop. In the video log, Daehyun saw himself, younger, standing before representatives of 100 species. He heard his own voice making the promise that had led them here. "We will sleep," the younger Daehyun said. "For 10,000 years, humanity will remove itself from the galaxy. We will not be a threat. We will not be a curse. When we wake, perhaps we will have learned to be better." The current Daehyun touched the screen, remembering that moment, the weight of responsibility, the hope that sleep would change them. Somehow, outside, Vril watched the massive structure and wondered what his drill had released into the galaxy. 3 days after the awakening, Kang Daehyun stood in what used to be the family quarters of the Eternal Vigil. The corridor stretched before him, lined with doors that would never open again. Behind each door, families slept in pods that had failed centuries ago. Parents and children, frozen in time, lost to system failures and the slow decay of technology that even the best engineering couldn't prevent forever. Park Jin-ho walked beside him, silent. The former Special Forces operator had been among the second wave of revivals, and like all the survivors, he was processing the magnitude of their loss. 500 people remained from a colony of 100,000. Everyone had lost someone. Everyone was grieving. "We need to move forward," Jin-ho finally said. His voice was steady, practical. It was what Daehyun needed to hear. "The survivors are asking questions. They want to know, what happens next?" "I don't have answers yet," Daehyun admitted. "We're in a galaxy that doesn't remember us. Our technology is 10,000 years old. Half our systems are failing." Then, we figure it out," Jin-ho replied. "That's what we do." In the engineering bay, Choi Hana was already working on exactly that. The young engineer had been one of the lucky ones, if anyone could call it luck. Her entire family had survived. Now she crawled through access tunnels, rerouting power, bypassing failed systems, bringing the old ship back to life piece by piece. "This design is incredible," she muttered to herself as she worked. They built things to last back then. Modern ships would have disintegrated after 100 years in dead space. This one survived 10,000. But as she worked, Hana couldn't stop thinking about the message logs she had read. The records of what humanity had done before the sleep. She had learned about the burning in school, of course. Every human child learned about their species' greatest shame. But reading the actual accounts, seeing the casualty numbers, understanding the scope of destruction humanity had caused, it made her wonder if they deserved to wake at all. On the bridge, Yun Mireille was thinking similar thoughts. She had spent 2 days reviewing historical archives, watching footage that had been sealed before the sleep. She saw human soldiers moving through alien cities, saw the weapons they had designed, each one more terrible than the last. Humanity hadn't just fought a war. They had fought like they were trying to exterminate every other species in the galaxy. "We were monsters," she whispered. "We were desperate," Daehyun said, from behind her. He had entered quietly, a habit from his military days. "I'm not making excuses. What we did was unforgivable. But I want you to understand the context." Mireille turned to face him. "Tell me. I need to know why it happened." Daehyun sat heavily in the commander's chair. Humanity expanded too fast. We found ourselves surrounded by species that had been in space for thousands of years. They had treaties, alliances, established territories. We were newcomers, and we wanted room to grow. When they pushed back, we pushed harder. And then we just kept pushing, Mireille finished. "Yes. We discovered we were good at war. Better than anyone expected. Human reflexes, human adaptability, human creativity in combat. It was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. We won battles we should have lost. We won wars against species with superior technology. And with each victory, we became more convinced of our own superiority. Well, this was withability. I Mataclist of one Jane, and well thing, well having man, and farm, well see into s. Until we weren't," Mireille said. Daehyun nodded. "Until we looked at what we had done and realized we had become the thing we feared. The galaxy's new apex predator. So we made a choice. The hardest choice humanity ever made. We agreed to sleep." An alarm interrupted their conversation. "Commander," Jinho called over the communications system. "We have incoming vessels. Multiple signatures. They're broadcasting Concordat identification codes." The Galactic Concordat had formed about 7,000 years ago, according to the data Vreel had shared. It was a loose alliance of species that governed most of the known galaxy. Now their ships were approaching the Eternal Vigil, and Daehyun had no idea what they wanted. The lead ship was elegant, flowing lines that spoke of a civilization that had never known humanity's brutal efficiency. A face appeared on the view screen. Features that blended avian and mammalian characteristics in ways Daehyun found fascinating. "I am Ambassador Krell of the Galactic Concordat," the being said. "I have been sent to assess your situation and determine how the Concordat should respond to your awakening." "We welcome dialogue," Daehyun replied carefully. "Though I'm not sure what protocols apply here. We're from a time before your Concordat existed." "Yes," Krell said slowly. "That presents unique challenges. My government has been reviewing ancient records since news of your discovery spread. What we've found is disturbing." "Government. HE." Daehyun felt his jaw tighten. "I imagine it is. We're prepared to share our full history, Ambassador. We won't hide what we were." What followed was the most difficult conversation of Daehyun's life. For 6 hours, he and Mireille walked Krell through humanity's history. They showed him the wars, the weapons, the death tolls. They explained how humanity had been given a choice between extinction by the allied species or self-imposed exile through cryogenic sleep. They showed him the promise humanity had made. Krell listened in silence. When they finished, he spoke carefully. Your honesty is appreciated. But you understand the situation you've created. The galaxy has spent 10,000 years recovering from what your species did. Many of the species you fought are gone now, extinct or evolved into new forms. The worlds you burned have been rebuilt, and now you return. We don't want to cause problems, Mireille interjected. We're not even sure what we want yet. We just woke up. I understand, Krell said. But you need to understand something as well. The Concordat has no protocols for this. No laws that cover a warrior species returning from exile. Some in my government are calling for your ship to be destroyed immediately, while you're still weak and disorganized. Daehyun felt Jinho tense beside him. The soldier's hand moved instinctively toward where a weapon would have been, if they had any. That seems unwise, Daehyun said quietly. It does, Krell agreed, because we don't know what you're capable of now. We don't know if you've changed, and we don't know how many more ships like yours are floating in dead space, waiting to wake. Mireille's eyes widened. She turned to her console, fingers flying across the interface. The colony program. Oh no! Daehyun. There were 12 colony ships. We weren't the only ones. Are they still sleeping? Daehyun demanded. I don't know. The network between ships went down millennia ago. But if they're out there, if the warning beacons are all offline like ours. Mireille trailed off. The implications clear. Krell leaned forward on the view screen. How many humans are in those ships? 100,000 per ship, Daehyun answered quietly. 1.2 million humans, scattered across the galaxy, sleeping in ships with failing beacons. The communications channel went silent. Daehyun could see Krell processing this information, understanding what it meant. Humanity wasn't just 500 survivors on an aging ship. They were potentially over 1 million strong, sleeping across the galaxy, waiting to wake. Before anyone could speak again, another alarm sounded. This one urgent, demanding immediate attention. The distress signal cut through the tension like a knife. Ambassador Krell's expression shifted from political concern to immediate alarm as the message played across all channels. A mining colony, home to 15,000 Concordat citizens, was under attack by Skrull raiders. The colony's defenses were failing. They had hours at most. Our nearest military response is 2 days away, Krell said, his voice tight with frustration. By the time they arrive, everyone will be dead or captured. Kang Daehyun studied the tactical display. The mining colony. The attacking force. The distance from the eternal vigil. His mind was already working through scenarios, calculating odds, planning approaches. 10,000 years of sleep hadn't dulled his training. If anything, having his thoughts clear for the first time in days made everything sharper. We could reach them in 6 hours, Daehyun said quietly. Everyone on the bridge turned to look at him. Park Jinho's eyes lit up with understanding. Lee Sora, the tactical officer who had been revived that morning, moved closer to the display. Bae Minho, one of their few surviving pilots, was already checking which shuttles were operational. You can't be serious, Krell said. Your ship hasn't moved in 10,000 years. Your weapons are ancient. Your crew numbers in the hundreds. The Skrull have a war fleet. How many ships? Sora asked, ignoring the ambassador's objections. 12 vessels, Krell replied, still looking at Daehyun with disbelief. Raider class. Heavily armed. Commander, I appreciate the gesture, but this would be suicide. Daehyun met Krell's eyes. You asked if we had changed. You asked if we're still what we were. Let us show you. 20 minutes later, Daehyun stood in the shuttle bay addressing 40 volunteers. These were soldiers, pilots, and tactical specialists who had trained for situations exactly like this. Even if the last time they had fought was 10 millennia ago, they wore armor that had been in storage, carried weapons that predated modern Concordat technology by thousands of years, and every single one of them looked ready. "I won't lie to you," Daehyun said. "We're outnumbered and outgunned. Our equipment is ancient. We haven't fought together in 10,000 years. By every logical measure, we shouldn't take this mission. But we're going to anyway," Jinho finished, a grim smile on his face. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because it's what we should have been doing all along," Daehyun corrected. "For too long, humanity used its gifts to destroy. Today, we use them to protect." The flight to the mining colony took 6 hours, just as Daehyun had calculated. During that time, Lee Sora studied everything they had on the scroll. She analyzed their tactics, their ship designs, their communication patterns. By the time they arrived, she had a plan. "They're overconfident," Sora explained, displaying her analysis on the shuttle screens. "The Skrull have been raiding Concordat space for months without serious opposition. They expect easy victories. We can use that." Bae Minho piloted their lead shuttle, his hands steady on the controls, despite not having flown in 10,000 years. As they approached the colony, Skrull ships moved to intercept. 12 massive raiders against 3 aging shuttles. The odds were absurd. "They're locking weapons," Minho reported, his voice calm. "Targeting solutions acquired. They'll fire in 10 seconds. Wait for it," Sora said, watching her tactical display. 5 seconds. Minho counted down. "Wait. 3 seconds. Now." Minho's hands moved across the controls with inhuman precision. The shuttle dropped, rolled, and accelerated in a pattern that shouldn't have been possible. The Skrull weapons fire went wide, missing by margins that made the pilots of the other 2 shuttles gasp in amazement. "How did you do that?" one of them asked over the communications channel. "Instinct," Minho replied, already lining up his own shot. "They aim where you are. Humans aim where you're going to be." What followed was a masterclass in asymmetric warfare. The 3 human shuttles moved through the Skrull fleet like ghosts. Never where the enemy expected. Always one step ahead. They didn't try to destroy the raiders. They didn't have the firepower for that. Instead, they targeted specific systems, crippling weapons, disabling engines, creating chaos. "Target their communications array on the lead ship," Sora ordered. "Make them fight blind." Minho's shot was perfect. The Skrull flagship went dark, unable to coordinate with its sister ships. Suddenly, 12 raiders were fighting as individuals, instead of as a fleet. On the mining colony's surface, Jinho led a team of 20 soldiers. They moved through the colony's corridors with practiced efficiency, evacuating civilians and setting up defensive positions. When they encountered Skrull boarding parties, the results were one-sided. The Skrull were warriors, trained and experienced. But they had never fought humans before. They had never encountered an enemy that moved with such coordination, that anticipated their tactics, that turned every environmental feature into a weapon. Jinho's team was outnumbered 5-1 in every engagement, yet the Skrull were the ones retreating. "They're pulling back," one of Jinho's soldiers reported, sounding almost disappointed. "Don't chase," Jinho ordered. "We're not here to hunt them. We're here to protect the colony." Back in space, the Skrull commander was having his worst day. His fleet of 12 ships was being humiliated by 3 shuttles. 3 ancient, outdated shuttles, piloted by a species he had never heard of. Every time he tried to adapt his tactics, the enemy adapted faster. Every trap he set was avoided. Every attack was countered. "What are they?" his tactical officer screamed in frustration. The commander didn't have an answer. He only knew that if he stayed, he would lose ships. The thought made him furious. The Skrull Dominion didn't retreat. They didn't fear anyone. But as he watched another of his raiders spin out of control, engines destroyed by an impossibly precise shot, the commander realized fear was the only sensible response. He ordered a retreat. The Skrull fleet jumped away, leaving the mining colony behind. In the sudden silence, the colonists emerged from their shelters to find human soldiers guiding them to safety. Ambassador Krell's ship arrived 2 hours later, his military escort ready for battle, only to find the battle was already over. Krell stood on the colony's surface, watching human soldiers help with evacuation and medical care. Vril was with him, the young archaeologist's eyes wide with wonder and fear. "I recorded everything," Vril said quietly. "The way they move, the way they think. Ambassador, they won, without superior firepower. They won because they understood the battle better than the Skrull did, because they thought 3 steps ahead." "I know," Krell said softly. "I watched." Daehyun approached them, his armor scarred but intact. "The colony is secure. Your medical teams can take over now. You saved 15,000 lives today," Krell said. "The Concordat owes you a debt." "We don't want a debt," Daehyun replied. "We want a chance to be better than we were." Krell nodded slowly. Then his expression changed, becoming grim. "Commander, you should know something. The Skrull don't take defeat well. They'll report this to their superiors. They'll tell their fleet about the humans who humiliated them. Is that a problem?" Daehyun asked. "It means you can't hide anymore," Krell said. "The galaxy is going to know you're awake. And not everyone will see this as a good thing." Far across the galaxy, in the heart of Skrull space, a report was being delivered to Overlord Krax. The supreme commander of the Skrull Dominion listened in silence as his raiding commander described the defeat. When the report finished, Krax spoke one word: humans. He accessed ancient databases, files that predated the Concordat by millennia, records that had been kept but never fully understood. Now, reading about humanity's wars, about the burning, about why this species had been forced into exile, Krax understood. "They're awake," he said to his council. "The galaxy's apex predators are awake, and they just proved they haven't lost their edge." "What do we do?" one of his advisors asked. Krax smiled, a predator's smile. "We destroy them, before they remember what they truly are, before they become a threat to our expansion." "They're only one ship," the advisor protested. 500 individuals. For now," Krax said. "But their records show 12 colony ships, over 1 million humans sleeping across the galaxy. If they wake, if they unite, they'll be unstoppable." He activated a communications array, sending messages across Skrull space. "Mobilize the war fleet. Find every human ship. Destroy them. Before they wake." The warning came 3 days after the mining colony rescue. Ambassador Krell arrived at the Eternal Vigil with news that made Kang Daehyun's blood run cold. The Skrull Dominion had declared humanity an infestation that needed to be cleansed. A war fleet was being assembled. 200 ships, all headed for the Eternal Vigil's position. "They're coming to destroy us," Yunmire said, stating the obvious because someone had to. 200 warships against 1 colony ship. "The Concordat is debating what to do," Krell explained. "Some want to help you. Others say this is your problem. The vote could take weeks. You don't have weeks." Daehyun stood at the bridge viewport, looking out at the stars. Behind him, his senior staff waited for orders. Park Jinho, Lee Sora, Bae Minho, and now others who had proven themselves in the rescue mission. Young faces and old soldiers, all looking to him for answers. "We're not running," Daehyun said finally. "We just woke up. We just started trying to be better. I won't let the Skrull take that away because they're afraid of what we might become." "Commander," Sora said carefully, "the odds are impossible. Even if we fight perfectly, we can't win against 200 ships." "Then we don't fight fair," Jinho suggested. "We never did before." Kim Junho, a cryptographer who had been revived the previous day, raised his hand hesitantly. The young man was brilliant with computers and codes, but combat clearly wasn't his strength. "I might be able to help with that." If we could access their communications network, I could gather intelligence. Maybe find weaknesses. 2. Do it, Daehyun ordered. We have 3 days before they arrive. Sora, I want defensive plans. Every scenario, every possibility. Minho, get our fighter squadron ready. I know we only have 10 fighters, but you proved at the colony that numbers aren't everything. What about the ship itself? Mirai asked. The Eternal Vigil wasn't designed for combat. It's a colony ship. Then we redesign it, Daehyun said. Choi Hana is already working miracles in engineering. Let's give her a bigger challenge. In the medical bay, Han Suji worked quietly, preparing for casualties she hoped wouldn't come. The young doctor had spent the last week treating minor injuries from the revival process and helping survivors cope with their losses. Now she was preparing for war, and the thought made her sick. You okay? One of her assistants asked. Suji nodded, though it was a lie. I became a doctor to save lives. Now I'm preparing to put people back together after we tear each other apart. It feels wrong. Would you rather we did nothing? Let the Skrull destroy us? No, Suji admitted. I'd rather we found a peaceful solution. But I'm starting to understand why humanity went to sleep. We're good at this. Violence. War. Maybe too good. The next 3 days were a blur of activity. Junho cracked the Skrull communication network easier than anyone expected. Apparently, the Skrull assumed their encryption was unbreakable. They hadn't counted on human creativity and a cryptographer who saw patterns in chaos. They're overconfident, Junho reported. Their messages are full of talk about easy victory. They think we'll surrender or run. Good, Sora said, building that overconfidence into her plans. Let them think we're easy prey. Good. Hana transformed the engineering bay into a weapons factory. She couldn't build new ships or advanced weapons, but she could improvise. Old mining equipment became jury-rigged railguns. Cargo containers became makeshift missiles. The colony ship's original navigation deflectors were repurposed into a defensive grid. It's not pretty, Hana told Daehyun, showing him her work. And it might not even work, but it's better than nothing. You've done well, Daehyun assured her. All of you have. I wish I could promise this would work out. I wish I could guarantee we'll survive. We know the risks, Jinho said. Everyone who stayed on this ship made a choice. We could have asked the Concordat for asylum. Some of us did, but most of us chose to stay. Why? Daehyun asked, genuinely curious. Because you're right, Hana answered. We spent 10,000 years running from what we were. Maybe it's time to show the galaxy what we could be instead. The Skrull fleet arrived exactly when Junho's intelligence predicted. 200 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation. Overlord Krax himself was leading the attack, his flagship massive and bristling with weapons. Human vessel. Krax's voice boomed across open channels. You have 24 hours to surrender unconditionally. If you do, we will show mercy. Your deaths will be quick. On the Eternal Vigil's bridge, Daehyun smiled. Not a happy smile, but the smile of someone who had been underestimated and knew it. He opened a return channel. Overlord Krax, this is Commander Kang Daehyun. You have 24 hours to retreat. This is your only warning. The communications channel went silent. Then Krax's laughter echoed across space, harsh and mocking. You dare threaten me? You? With your single ancient ship and your handful of crew? I have 200 warships. I have thousands of warriors. What do you have? Daehyun's expression became serious. We have something you've forgotten, Overlord. We're humans, and you really should have checked your history more carefully before you threatened us. Krax's laughter stopped. For just a moment, the Skrull commander seemed uncertain. Then pride reasserted itself. History is written by survivors, and you won't be. The Skrull fleet began its attack formation. Across the eternal vigil, alarms sounded. Crew members moved to their stations with practiced efficiency. In the fighter bay, Minho and his 9 fellow pilots climbed into spacecraft that were older than most civilizations. In engineering, Hana made final adjustments to systems that shouldn't work, but somehow did. In medical, Suji prepared to save whoever she could. On the bridge, Sora pulled up her tactical display. 3 days of planning had gone into what was about to happen. Every scenario, every possibility, every backup plan. She had one advantage. She knew how humans fought. The Skrull didn't. "They're moving into attack formation," she reported calmly. "Predictable pattern. They're grouping ships for maximum firepower, which makes them easier to hit," Jinho observed. He was leading the shipboard defense teams, ready for if any Skrull managed to board. "Begin Phase 1, Daihun ordered. The eternal vigil had been drifting, seemingly powerless, and waiting for destruction. Now, it moved. Not much, just enough to position itself near a cluster of debris that had accumulated around it over 10,000 years. As the Skrull fleet closed in, Hana activated the makeshift railguns. They weren't shooting at ships, they were shooting at debris, sending chunks of ancient metal and ice hurtling into the Skrull formation. It wasn't elegant, but it created chaos. Ships swerved to avoid collisions. Perfect formations broke apart. Warriors who had been confident became confused. "They're adapting," Sora noted. "Reforming into smaller groups. Send in the fighters." 10 fighters launched from the eternal vigil. 10 ancient craft against 200 modern warships. By any logical measure, they should have been destroyed in seconds. Instead, they became ghosts. Minho led them through the Skrull fleet, never where expected, always one step ahead. They targeted communications arrays, sensor clusters, anything that would blind and confuse. "We can't keep this up forever," Minho reported, his voice tight with concentration. "But we can make them angry." "That's the plan," Sora replied. "Make them angry enough to make mistakes." Krax watched from his flagship as the impossible happened. His fleet was being harassed by a force that should have been crushed immediately. Every time his tactical officers predicted the human fighters' movements, they were wrong. Every trap failed. Every ambush was avoided. "What are they?" he demanded again, the question becoming a scream. His tactical officer pulled up ancient records, the ones Krax had dismissed before. "They're humans, Overlord. This is what they do. They adapt. They improvise. They win battles they shouldn't survive." Krax stared at the records. At the casualty counts from humanity's ancient wars. At the tactical analyses that showed impossible victories. At the warnings from species long extinct that humans should never be underestimated. "Then we use overwhelming force," Krax decided. "All ships. Concentrate fire on the colony ship. Ignore the fighters. Destroy their home, and they'll have nowhere to return to." It was exactly what Sora had predicted he would do. The Skrull fleet turned as one. 200 warships focusing their weapons on the eternal vigil. Overlord Krax watched his tactical display with satisfaction. The human ship was old, barely functional. One concentrated bombardment would reduce it to debris. The humans would learn that ancient warriors couldn't stand against modern power. "Fire," Krax commanded. 200 ships opened fire simultaneously. Energy, weapons, and missiles filled space with deadly light. It was enough firepower to crack a planet. Against one colony ship, it should have been instant annihilation. Should have been. On the Eternal Vigil's bridge, Lee Sora watched the incoming fire with calm calculation. 3 seconds to impact. Activating defensive grid now. The jury-rigged deflectors that Choi Hana had built hummed to life. They weren't shields, not really. They were repurposed navigation systems that created electromagnetic fields, strong enough to deflect smaller projectiles and weaken energy beams. Combined with the ship's evasive maneuvers and the debris field they had been hiding in, they created just enough protection. Most of the Skrull barrage missed or was deflected. Some hit, sending shudders through the old ship's frame. But the Eternal Vigil survived. Damaged but intact, it emerged from the bombardment still functional. Impossible, Krax breathed. How are they still alive? Kang Daehyun answered over the open channel, his voice steady. Because we've had 10,000 years to think about our mistakes, Overlord. We learned from them. Have you? Before Krax could respond, the human counterattack began. It wasn't what the Skrull expected. No massive weapons, no devastating firepower. Instead, the 10 human fighters that had been harassing the fleet suddenly changed tactics. They stopped running and started hunting. Bae Minho led his squadron straight into the heart of the Skrull formation. What followed was a masterpiece of combat flying that would be studied for generations. The fighters moved in perfect coordination, each pilot anticipating the other's moves without communication. They targeted specific ships, not to destroy them, but to disable them in ways that caused maximum chaos. Target that cruiser's maneuvering thrusters, Minho called. Make it spin into its neighbor. His shot was perfect. The Skrull cruiser began rotating uncontrollably, colliding with 2 other ships. None were destroyed, but 3 ships were suddenly out of the fight. Across the battlefield, Park Jin-ho was leading his own mission. While everyone focused on space combat, he and 20 soldiers had quietly boarded one of the closer Skrull vessels. They moved through the enemy ship like ghosts, invisible until it was too late. Bridge secured, Jin-ho reported. Taking control of their systems now. Kim Jun-ho, transmitting from the Eternal Vigil, guided Jin-ho's team through the Skrull computer networks. Within minutes, they had access to the enemy ship's communications. Jun-ho began broadcasting false orders, sending Skrull ships crashing into each other, creating confusion and friendly fire incidents. They're fighting themselves, one of Sora's tactical officers reported with amazement. Commander, they're actually fighting themselves. Humans don't just fight with weapons, Sora explained, her expression thoughtful. We fight with information, psychology, fear. We turn the enemy's strengths into weaknesses. Krax watched his fleet descend into chaos and felt something he hadn't experienced in years. Fear. His ships were superior. His warriors were trained. His technology was modern. Yet somehow, he was losing. The humans were cutting through his fleet. Like predators, through prey. All ships, fall back to defensive formation, he ordered. Regroup and reassess. But the order came too late. Jin-ho's captured ship rammed into Krax's flagship. Not hard enough to destroy either vessel, but enough to disable the flagship's main weapons. Suddenly, the Skrull command ship was vulnerable. Board them, Daehyun ordered. More human soldiers launched from the Eternal Vigil in boarding pods. They hit the Skrull flagship and fought their way through corridors, designed for warriors twice their size. The Skrull defenders were shocked to find themselves outmatched. These humans moved with precision and purpose, working together in ways that made them far more dangerous than their numbers suggested. Jin-ho reached the flagship's bridge first. Krax turned to face him, weapons ready, prepared to fight to the death. But Jin-ho didn't fire. Instead, he lowered his weapon slightly. Surrender, Jin-ho said simply. You've lost. Your fleet is broken. Your ships are scattered. You can die here, or you can live and learn from this. You would show mercy? Krax asked, confused. After what I tried to do to your people? That's the difference between us and you, Jin-ho replied. We learned when to fight and when to show compassion. Have you? Krax looked at his tactical displays. His fleet of 200 ships had been reduced to chaos. Not all destroyed, but disorganized, disabled, demoralized. The humans had won not through superior firepower, but through superior thinking. Every trap he had set, they had avoided. Every tactic he had tried, they had countered. They had fought like they could see the future. Slowly, Krax lowered his weapons. I surrender. The battle ended not with explosions, but with exhaustion. The Skrull fleet retreated, leaving behind disabled ships and their pride. The humans had won, though the cost showed on every face. They were exhausted, pushed to their limits, operating on skill and desperation. In the medical bay, Hansuji worked frantically to save the wounded. Both human and Skrull injured filled her tables. She made no distinction between them, treating everyone with the same care. When a Skrull warrior asked why she would help an enemy, Suji's answer was simple: because I'm a doctor. Because every life matters. Because if we only save our own people, we're no better than what we used to be. Ambassador Krell arrived with a Concordat fleet hours later, prepared to find the Eternal Vigil destroyed. Instead, he found it damaged but victorious. Surrounded by disabled Skrull ships, he stood on the bridge, looking at Daehyun with an expression mixing awe and concern. "You won," Krell said, stating the obvious. "Against impossible odds, you won. We survived," Daehyun corrected. "We protected ourselves. But we also showed mercy. We could have destroyed every Skrull ship. Instead, we disabled them. We gave them a chance to retreat." "Why?" Krell asked. "After they tried to exterminate you? Because that's the point," Yunmire answered, joining the conversation. "We went to sleep because we were monsters. We woke up trying to be better. If we had massacred the Skrull fleet, we would have proven we hadn't changed at all." Vreel was with Krell, recording everything as always. The young archaeologist's notes would become required reading in the Concordat. His final entry summarized everything he had learned. "They were monsters once," Vreel wrote. "The ancient records were clear about that. Humanity nearly destroyed the galaxy through unchecked aggression, but they recognized what they were becoming and chose to change. They sentenced themselves to 10,000 years of exile, hoping to wake different. Today, they proved they succeeded. They fought with all their old skill, all their terrifying effectiveness in combat, but they fought to protect, not to conquer. They showed mercy to an enemy who offered none. The galaxy feared them for what they were. Now, it should respect them for what they've become." Days later, Mireille made a discovery that changed everything. While repairing the Eternal Vigil's communication systems, she found signals. Faint, ancient, but unmistakable. The other 11 colony ships were out there, scattered across the galaxy, and they were waking up. "How many?" Daehyun asked. "I can't tell yet," Mireille admitted. "But the signals suggest their revival sequences have been triggered. When one ship wakes, it sends a signal to the others, a failsafe in case something went wrong. We triggered that signal 3 weeks ago, so they're all waking up," Jinho said. "Over 1 million humans returning to the galaxy." "What will you do?" Krell asked. "The Concordat needs to know." Daehyun thought carefully before answering. "We'll find them, help them adjust, and then we'll make an offer to the Concordat. Humanity will serve as protectors, not conquerors. We'll use our abilities to defend those who can't defend themselves. We'll be what we should have been from the beginning. And if some humans don't agree," Krell pressed, "if some want to return to the old ways, then we'll stop them," Daehyun said firmly. "We police our own. We take responsibility for our species. That's part of earning the galaxy's trust." The Concordat's response came a week later. They offered humanity full membership, with conditions. Humans would serve as a defense force, training Concordat military and responding to threats. In exchange, they would receive resources, technology, and most importantly, acceptance. Daehyun stood before the Concordat Council, representing a species that had been extinct in living memory. "We accept your terms, but know this. We're not the humans who burned your worlds 10,000 years ago. We're not the warriors who saw every problem as something to destroy. We've learned. We've grown. We're ready to be part of this galaxy again, not as conquerors, but as guardians. Across space, the other colony ships continued waking. Humans emerged from 10,000 years of sleep, confused and grieving their losses. But they also found messages from the eternal vigil, from Daehyun and the first survivors. Messages of hope and purpose. The warning beacons around human space activated again, but with a new message. Not a warning to stay away, but an invitation. Humanity has returned. We remember what we were. We've chosen what we'll be. Welcome to human space. We're here to help. Our one we have a ground. We have a ground. We have a ground. On the eternal vigil, Daehyun stood at the viewport, watching stars that hadn't changed in 10,000 years. Beside him, the crew that had survived impossible odds began the work of rebuilding their lives and their species' reputation. Do you think we can do it? Mireille asked. Really change the galaxy's view of us? We already did, Daehyun replied. We fought the Skrull and showed them mercy. We helped the Concordat and asked for nothing in return. Actions matter more than words, and our actions will show the galaxy who we are now. Who are we? Mireille pressed. Daehyun smiled. We're humans. We're survivors. We're warriors when we need to be, and guardians when we choose to be. We're not perfect, but we're trying. And sometimes, in Skrull space, Krax made his own report to his government. He described the defeat, the humiliation, the impossible tactics. He expected punishment, perhaps even execution. Instead, he received an order that surprised him. Learn from this. The humans are awake, Krax's superior said. We cannot ignore them, and we cannot defeat them through force alone. We must adapt, or we'll be left behind. Across the galaxy, the news spread. Humanity was back. The sleeping giants had woken. Some species feared them. Others were curious. But all of them knew one thing. The galaxy had just become a far more interesting place. 10,000 years ago, humanity had gone to sleep in shame and exile. They woke to a galaxy that had forgotten them, that had no idea what they were capable of. In just weeks, they had reminded everyone, not through conquest, but through protection. Not through destruction, but through mercy. The galaxy had forgotten why it shouldn't wake them. Now, it remembered. But the reason had changed. Humanity wasn't a threat anymore. They were something far more valuable. They were protectors who understood the cost of war because they had once been its architects. And that made all the difference.